Gabriel Thorne drove to his late mother's shuttered lake house, planning to sell it by sundown. And before he even stepped fully inside, he realized someone was hiding there. He was a millionaire now, the kind of man who signed contracts from the back seat of a black car and made hard decisions before breakfast. But what he was about to find behind those boarded windows would drag him straight back into the poorest days of his life. And if you stay with me, you'll hear the moment one child turned his planned eviction into something he never saw coming. He had not visited the place in years. The driveway was half swallowed by weeds, and the old chain across the gate gave with a rusty snap that echoed over the water. The lake lay gray and still behind the house, and the porch leaned a little more than he remembered. His mother had loved that place with the stubborn loyalty of people who make a home out of very little. Gabriel had loved her, but the house itself carried too many memories. Thin soup, cold mornings, bills stacked in a chipped bowl by the sink. Nights when she smiled through worry and told him they were fine. Now he stood there in an expensive coat, polished shoes sinking into soft ground, and looked at the same worn steps he used to climb with holes in his sneakers. "I'll be in and out," he muttered to himself, already reaching for his phone. The resort developer wanted a fast answer. Gabriel intended to give one. But the minute he came around to the side porch, he stopped. There were signs, small ones, fresh ones. A mug sat upside down on the railing, still clean from a recent rinse. Near the back steps, he spotted a tiny sock hanging from a bush branch, as if someone had washed it and forgotten it there. And when he pressed his palm to the side door, he felt warmth, faint but real, just enough to tell him the house was not dead after all. Gabriel's jaw tightened. "Great," he said under his breath. "Squatters." He unlocked the door and pushed it open. The hinges gave a long, complaining groan. Inside, the air smelled like dust, damp wood, and something else. Broth. Cheap broth, maybe vegetable, maybe chicken, the kind made to stretch. One corner of the kitchen had been cleaned. 3 mismatched bowls sat drying on a towel. A blanket was folded on a chair that had belonged to his mother. His heart gave one hard thud. "Who's here?" he called. No answer. He took 2 steps forward. Somewhere above him, a floorboard creaked. Then came a second sound. Quick, light, frightened, several. And if this story already has your heart, like the video and subscribe. Because when Gabriel looked up toward the dark stairway, he knew there were children in that house. He stood still for a second, listening. The house had gone so quiet that Gabriel could hear the old refrigerator ticking in the kitchen and the soft tap of a loose branch brushing the siding outside. Then another sound came from upstairs, a quick breath like somebody trying very hard not to make one. He looked toward the narrow staircase, its railing still scarred where he had once slid toy boats down it as a boy, and his voice came out lower this time. "I'm not here to hurt anyone," he said, "but I need you to come down." Nothing. He started up the stairs anyway, each step giving a tired groan under his weight. The air got colder on the landing. One of the windows had been covered from the inside with an old quilt, and a sliver of light leaked around the edge. At the end of the hallway, the door to his mother's sewing room was half open. That was where he saw them. A young woman stood with her back against the wall, one arm spread slightly as if she could shield all 3 children with it. She looked no older than her middle 20s, pale from strain, with tired eyes and hair pulled into a loose knot that had half fallen apart. Her sweater sleeves were rolled over her hands as if she had been cold for a long time. Beside her, a thin girl with a sharp little chin stood stiff and silent. A boy hovered near the bed frame, clutching a spoon like it might become a weapon if he needed one. And the smallest child, a little girl in an oversized sweatshirt, had frozen so completely she almost looked carved out of candle wax. Gabriel stopped in the doorway. For one strange beat, nobody moved. Then the young woman spoke first. "Please," she said, and her voice shook even though she was clearly trying to keep it steady. "Please don't call anyone yet. I can explain." Gabriel stared at them, at the pile of folded blankets in the corner, at the cracked pitcher filled with lake water, at a stack of canned beans lined up on the floorboards. Somebody had made this room livable with almost nothing. That hit him harder than he expected. "Who are you?" he asked. "My name is Cora Denning." "And the children?" Her hand tightened around the smallest girl's shoulder. "They're with me." That didn't answer the question. The older girl finally looked up at him. Her eyes were too wary for her age. "We didn't break anything," she said quickly. "We only used the downstairs pan, and we swept. We always sweep." Gabriel felt something pinch in his chest, and he hated that feeling immediately. "This house isn't empty by accident," he said. "I came here to prepare it for sale." At that, the little boy made a small sound in his throat. Cora closed her eyes for a moment, just one moment, like she'd been waiting for those exact words since the day they walked in. "I know," she whispered. "I figured this day would come." Gabriel looked from her face to the children again. They weren't just frightened. They were braced, like people who had learned bad news usually arrived wearing decent shoes. Then he noticed something else on the floor beside the bed. 3 paper place cards, each with a name written in careful block letters, like someone had been trying to make supper feel normal. And when he asked, "How long have you been living in my house?" Cora took a breath and gave him an answer that changed the whole shape of the room. Cora answered him without looking away. 3 weeks, she said, maybe a little more. I counted at first, then I stopped. The number settled over the room like a draft. 3 weeks in a house he had locked up. 3 weeks of cooking in his mother's kitchen, sleeping under her roof, moving quietly enough that no one from the road had thought to call him. Gabriel leaned one shoulder against the doorframe and looked again, this time more carefully. The blankets in the corner had been layered with old curtains for warmth. A cracked blue bowl held cough drops, each one cut in half to make them last. Someone had scrubbed a ring out of the floor where a bucket must have sat for days. "You picked this place at random?" he asked. Cora swallowed. "No. Someone at the shelter told me about it, an older woman who used to come by with blankets in winter. She said the woman who owned this house used to let people warm up here sometimes, years ago." Her eyes moved over his face then, trying to read what that meant. "I didn't know she was your mother until I found an old utility bill in a drawer." Gabriel said nothing. His mother had done things like that. Invited trouble in for soup, handed out jars of preserves when they barely had enough for themselves. He used to resent it. Standing there now, he didn't know what he felt. The girl near the wall spoke next, very quietly. "I'm Nell." The boy lifted his chin as if he had to prove something. "Toby." The smallest one said nothing at all. She only pressed both hands into Cora's skirt and stared at Gabriel with huge, tired eyes. "June," Cora said for her, brushing a hand over the child's hair. "She's shy with strangers." Gabriel nodded once. "And you're what, their aunt?" A flicker crossed Cora's face. It looked almost like shame, though he would later understand it was something more complicated than that. "No," she said. "I'm nobody on paper." That answer landed harder than he expected. She drew in a breath, and when she spoke again, the words came slower, chosen with care. "I worked nights at a shelter. I checked cots in the family room, handed out juice boxes, kept little kids calm when they woke up scared. That's where I met them. Their parents died last year. Since then, they've been passed around by adults who wanted the money meant for them more than they wanted the children." Nell dropped her gaze to the floorboards. Toby's fingers tightened around the spoon until his knuckles went pale. June tucked her face against Cora's side. Gabriel felt the muscles in his jaw pull tight. "So where is the relative who's supposed to be caring for them?" Cora gave a brittle little laugh that held no humor at all. "Spending their benefit checks, probably." He straightened. The practical part of him tried to take over again, cold and efficient. This was ugly. It was sad. it was still not his problem. The developer was waiting. The house had to be emptied. The legal risk alone made his head start to pound. "You understand," he said, and his voice came out harder now, "that whatever your reasons are, you can't stay here." At that, little June looked up for the first time. Then she slipped free of Cora's hand, crossed the floor in 2 tiny steps, and reached under the bed for a folded piece of paper. June unfolded the paper with both hands, careful with it the way children are careful with things that matter more than adults understand. Gabriel took it almost without thinking. The page was soft at the creases, as if it had been opened and closed many times. Drawn in thick crayon lines was the house by the lake, a crooked porch, a square of yellow in the window for lamplight, and 4 stick figures standing under a roof that looked too large for them. At the top, in uneven letters, one word had been pressed so hard the crayon had torn the paper a little. Home. The room went very still. June pointed to the picture, then to the window behind Gabriel, as if she needed to make sure he understood. "That's here," she whispered. He looked down again. The lake was blue, brighter than it had any right to be on such a rough drawing. Smoke rose from the chimney in a gray spiral. One of the figures had brown yarn-like lines for hair. Cora, probably. The smallest figure held a red shape that might have been a cup, or maybe a mitten. It didn't matter. What mattered was that somebody had given that place a name he had spent years refusing to use. Home. A memory came over him so fast it felt like stepping into cold water. He was 8 again, standing in this same house in socks gone thin at the heel. His mother was scraping the last bit of peanut butter from a jar and spreading it across too much bread, pretending she'd already eaten. Outside, a snowstorm tapped at the windows. Inside, she had smiled and said, "As long as we can shut the door and keep each other warm, we're rich in the ways that count." He had hated that sentence then. Hated how poor it sounded. Hated the way love was always expected to make up for what money couldn't buy. Now, with the drawing in his hand and 3 orphaned children watching his face, he couldn't seem to breathe quite right. Cora saw the change before he spoke. Her shoulders loosened by 1/2 an inch, no more than that, but enough to show she had been bracing for the worst. "She drew it the second night we were here," she said softly. "I didn't tell her to write that." Gabriel swallowed. "I'm sure you didn't." The practical part of him still fought to stay in charge. The developer was expecting his call. The title papers were in his car. If anybody found out strangers had been living here, there would be questions, liability, delays. He knew all of that. He knew it the way he knew numbers on a balance sheet. But the little girl had handed him a truth he couldn't file away. He lowering the page slowly. "1 week," he said. Cora blinked. "What?" "You can stay 1 week, 7 days. After that, we figure something else out." Toby let out the breath he'd been holding. Nell stared at Gabriel as if she didn't trust her own ears. June smiled for the first time, sudden and small and bright enough to hurt. Cora's eyes filled, though she clearly did not want them to. "Mr. Thorne." "Gabriel," he said almost sharply, because hearing Mr. in that room made him feel older and harder than he wanted to be. He handed the drawing back to June. "I'm not promising more than a week." He turned before anyone could thank him, walked down the narrow stairs, and crossed the kitchen too fast. The house smelled of broth and old wood, and a life improvised 1 day at a time. He reached the porch, stepped into the late afternoon air, and stood there with one hand on the rail. Then he heard something behind him. Covered doors opening downstairs, quick whispers, a child laughing once in disbelief. And halfway back to his car, Gabriel realized he had forgotten to ask the one question that suddenly mattered most. What, exactly, were they hiding from? The question followed him all the way down the road. Gabriel drove with the windows up, though the inside of the car felt close and airless. June's drawing lay on the passenger seat beside his leather folder of sale papers, and every time he glanced at it, the contrast made him grit his teeth. One stack represented profit, convenience, a clean ending. The other was a child's crayon house with smoke curling from the roof. By the time he reached the main road, he had passed the turn toward the city without meaning to. He kept driving until he found himself in the parking lot of a grocery store. For a full minute, he stayed behind the wheel, fingers resting on the steering wheel, engine ticking softly. "This is temporary," he said out loud, as if the windshield might argue. "A week. That's all." But then he remembered the cracked bowl with the cough drops cut in half, the place cards on the floor, the way Toby had held a spoon like a boy who had learned ordinary objects might have to defend him. He exhaled hard, got out, and grabbed a cart. He moved through the aisles like a man following instructions nobody else could hear. Bread, eggs, oatmeal, apples, peanut butter. Soup that didn't need much work. Pasta, rice, carrots, milk, tea, soap, toothpaste. Then he stopped at a rack of children's coats near the front of the store and stared at them longer than he meant to. He chose 3. A red one for June, a navy one for Toby, a green one for Nell. At the last second, he added thick socks, mittens, and a pair of fleece blankets that looked too soft for people used to making do. At another shop, he bought 2 lamps, light bulbs, a space heater, and a stack of notebooks with pencils tucked into the wire binding. In the bookstore next door, he picked out a picture book, a beginner chapter book, and an illustrated bird guide because he remembered Toby's sharp, restless eyes and had the feeling that boy would ask questions about everything once he felt safe enough to ask them. By the time he turned back toward the lake, the trunk was full and daylight was thinning to gold. At the house, he sat in the car again for a moment. Through the front window, he saw a weak yellow glow, probably from one surviving lamp downstairs. A shadow passed in front of it. Cora, maybe. Another smaller one followed. He suddenly felt awkward in a way boardrooms never made him feel. Buying things was easy. Arriving with them was something else. When he knocked, there was a long pause before the door opened a cautious few inches. Cora looked from his face to the bags in his hands, and her expression changed at once. Surprise first, then wariness, then something like embarrassment. "You came back," she said. "I said I would give you a week." Her gaze dropped to the groceries again. "Mr. Thorne, we can't take charity." He almost said it wasn't charity, but the word stuck. The bags were heavy in his fingers. The wind off the water carried the smell of pine and the cold edge of evening. Behind her, he could hear June coughing. And before he could answer, a small voice from inside asked, "Did he bring food?" The question came from Toby, though he tried to sound as if he didn't care too much about the answer. Gabriel looked past Cora and saw the boy standing in the hallway, thin shoulders squared, bare feet on the worn floorboards. Nell was just behind him, one hand resting on June's back. The little girl had both eyes fixed on the grocery bags like they were something unreal. "Yes," Gabriel said. He lifted the bags slightly. The paper handles creaked in his hands. "And soap, and a few other things." Cora closed her eyes for half a second, then stepped aside. "All right, come in before the cold follows you." The kitchen felt different from the day before. Still poor, still patched together, but now touched by the smell of onion and broth warming on the stove. Someone had set 3 mugs in a neat row beside the sink. A dish towel, washed and wrung out, hung from the oven handle. It was the kind of order people make when they have almost nothing else to control. Gabriel set the groceries on the table. For a moment, nobody moved. Then June drifted closer, slow as a kitten, and touched the sleeve of the red coat poking out of one bag. "For us?" she asked. "For whoever fits in them," he said, and instantly hated how stiff that sounded. Toby was already peering into another bag. "There's apples," he breathed. Nell, trying very hard to be the oldest, caught his wrist. "Don't grab." "It's all right," Gabriel said. "Take the apples." The children looked at Cora before they touched a thing. Only when she nodded did Toby lift one out and stare at it with open hunger. June held hers in both hands as if it were warm. Nell quietly set out the bread, the peanut butter, the box of tea, arranging them with care that made Gabriel look away for a second. Cora pulled the coats free one by one. Her fingers stopped on the fleece lining. "These are too much." "They're coats," he said. "It gets colder by the lake at night." "That's not what I mean." He met her eyes. Hers were grateful, yes, but also guarded, and he understood then that pride was not vanity. Pride was one of the last walls a person had when the rest of life had been stripped bare. "I found a burst pipe under the sink," he said, nodding toward the cabinet. "Think of this as repayment for not letting the whole place fall apart." Her mouth twitched despite herself. "That is a terrible excuse." "It's the one I have." A tiny laugh escaped June before she could stop it. The sound was so bright and brief that everyone in the room seemed to hear it as something fragile. While the children tried on coats, Gabriel crouched near the sink and opened the cabinet. Damp wood, mineral smell, old metal. The pipe was worse than he'd guessed. He reached in and his fingers brushed something taped to the back panel. He peeled it loose and unfolded a yellowed scrap of paper. The handwriting hit him before the words did. His mother's. Quick, slanted, familiar. "If anybody ever needs shelter, put them in the warm room first." Gabriel stared at the note until the letters blurred for a second. Then he heard Cora behind him, her voice suddenly quiet. "What does it say?" He turned with the paper still in his hand, and for the first time since returning to the house, he didn't know whether he was standing in his own past or somebody else's future. For a moment, Cora only looked at the note in his hand. Then she came closer, wiping her palms on her jeans first, almost like she didn't want to smudge the past. Gabriel passed it to her. The paper was brittle at the folds, and she read it twice, lips parting slightly on the second time through. Behind them, the kitchen gave off the soft sounds of children trying very hard to be quiet while still being children. The dull thump of a coat dropped on a chair, an apple rolling against the table leg, June's small cough. "She really wrote that?" Cora asked. "She did." Gabriel's voice came out rougher than he meant it to. "Sounds like her, too." Cora gave a faint nod and handed the note back like it was something sacred. "Then I guess we found the right house." He should have corrected her, should have reminded her that a week was still a week, and that one dead woman's kindness didn't settle anything. Instead, he tucked the note into his coat pocket and reached for the wrench he'd spotted near the sink. "Let me see what I can do about this pipe." It took him longer than expected. The fittings were old, his hands were colder than he realized, and the cabinet smelled of damp wood and rust. Toby hovered nearby in the navy coat, watching every turn of Gabriel's wrist with sharp attention. Nell sliced apples into careful quarters using a butter knife, lining them on a chipped plate so June would think there was more than there was. Cora moved between stove and table with that same quiet, practical grace he had already started noticing. She used little, wasted nothing, kept everybody else steady first. "You know how to fix things?" Toby asked at last. "Some things. Like pipes?" "On a decent day." Toby considered that. "Do millionaires fix their own pipes?" Gabriel almost laughed. "Not usually." "Then why are you?" "Because nobody else is here," he thought. "Because this house once held me together. Because your coat is still too thin for this weather and I don't know what to do with that feeling yet." But what he said was, because this one needed fixing. By the time the leak slowed to a stop, the kitchen had grown warmer. Cora ladled broth into the 3 mugs, then hesitated before reaching for a 4th. "It's only soup," she said. "Mostly potatoes and onion." Gabriel took the mug anyway. Steam fogged his vision for a second. The taste was simple, salty, stretched thin, and familiar enough to unsettle him. He stood at the counter while the children sat at the table. June had already folded her red coat beside her like it belonged there. Toby ate fast at first, then slowed himself down on purpose. Nell thanked Cora before every bite as if manners were one of the few things no one had managed to take from her. Gabriel noticed something else, too. Cora never sat. She stayed moving, tearing bread, refilling water, brushing crumbs into her palm. And when he glanced at the pot on the stove, he saw there was barely enough left at the bottom for half a bowl. "You haven't eaten," he said. Her head came up at once. "I'm fine." Nell looked down. Toby looked at Gabriel. June hugged her mug with both hands. The silence that followed told him more than the answer had. And just then, from somewhere out by the road, headlights swept once across the kitchen wall, slow, deliberate, and gone. The sweep of headlights changed the whole kitchen. June flinched so hard her mug rattled against her teeth. Toby was out of his chair in a flash, pulling her down beside him. Nell reached for the lamp and turned the wick lower without even being asked, as if they had practiced that move before. Cora didn't gasp, didn't freeze, but all the color drained from her face. Gabriel saw it happen in real time. "Stay here," he said. He set his mug down and crossed the kitchen in 3 quick steps. The porch boards groaned under him as he stepped out into the night. The air by the lake had gone sharp and damp, cold enough to sting his lungs. He looked toward the road beyond the trees. No car now, no engine, just darkness, the faint silver line of the water, and the whisper of leaves moving over one another. He walked to the edge of the drive anyway. Gravel shifted under his shoes. Near the turnoff, fresh tire marks cut through the mud, darker than the older tracks. Somebody had come slow enough to look, slow enough to make sure the house was occupied. When he came back inside, the room was still dim. Cora had both arms around June. Toby stood near the window with his jaw clenched, trying to look older than 7. Nell had not sat back down. "That wasn't random," Gabriel said. Cora looked at him for a long moment, and then she gave up pretending. "No." He waited. She wet her lips. "Sometimes a car passes and keeps going. Sometimes it slows." Her eyes flicked toward the dark glass. "That one slowed too much." "Whose car?" "I don't know for sure." "That's not the same as not knowing." Her shoulders tightened. "There's a man named Darren Pike. He's their uncle. On paper, at least. He took over after their parents died. He signed forms, collected what came for them, told people he was handling everything." She looked down at June's hair as she spoke. "The truth is, he handled the money. The children got whatever was cheapest, and sometimes not even that." The words landed heavy in the little kitchen. Gabriel glanced at the half-empty soup pot, the cut-up cough drops, the way Nell had folded the bread bag so carefully to save the twist tie. The whole room was evidence. "So you ran," he said. Cora nodded once. "I took a night shift because I needed the work. They were brought into the shelter a few times when he disappeared for a day or 2. I got to know them there. Then June got sick, and he still wouldn't buy medicine. Toby stopped pretending he wasn't hungry. Nell started hiding food in her sleeves for the younger 2. Her voice thinned, but held. "One night I packed what I could carry and I brought them here." Nobody spoke for several seconds. Gabriel felt anger rise in him, sudden and hot, because he knew men like that. Men who called greed responsibility and expected nobody to challenge them. Then his phone buzzed in his coat pocket. The sound made all 3 children jump. He pulled it out. The screen lit his hand blue in the dim room, and the name there made his stomach harden. Wesley Crane, the resort developer. When Gabriel answered, Wesley's cheerful voice came through at once. "Gabriel, just checking in. Tell me you're standing in an empty house and ready to sign." Gabriel glanced once at the kitchen before he answered. 3 faces were turned toward him now, though they tried not to seem like they were listening. Cora stood very still with June against her side, her eyes fixed on his phone as if the voice on the other end could somehow step through the speaker and into the room. The old lamp threw a weak amber circle across the table, over the bread bag, over the red coat folded beside June's elbow. Everything in that kitchen felt suddenly fragile. He stepped out onto the porch and pulled the door nearly shut behind him. "Not tonight," he said. There was a short pause. Then Wesley laughed lightly, the way men laugh when they think they're speaking to somebody reasonable. "What do you mean, not tonight? You told me you were heading up there to clear the place, take a look around, and we'd close this week." Gabriel stared out into the dark line of trees. "I found a few issues." "What kind of issues?" House issues. That place has had house issues for years. That's why we're buying the land under it. Wesley's tone sharpened. You said you wanted this done fast. I did. Did? Gabriel rubbed his brow. His breath clouded faintly in the cool air. He had spent years becoming a man who made quick, profitable choices. That had been his pride. Tonight, for the first time in a long time, that same instinct felt cheap. I need a few days, he said. A few days for what? He could have lied better. He knew how. He did it in negotiations all the time, dressed up as strategy. But with that kitchen behind him and the sound of June's cough still sitting in his chest, the usual smoothness just wasn't there. To think, he said. Wesley went quiet. Then, very flatly, Gabriel, don't tell me you're getting sentimental about that old place. The words hit a nerve because they were too close to the truth. Gabriel straightened. I said I need a few days. You'll have your answer. He ended the call before Wesley could push again. For a moment, he stayed outside, hands still around the phone. The porch rail felt cold through his palm. Somewhere out by the dock, water slapped softly against wood. He was angry now, though not at Wesley. Angry at the headlights on the road. Angry at Darren Pike, a man he had never met. Angry at himself for walking into the house intending to empty it and discovering that he no longer knew how to do that without feeling ashamed. When he went back inside, nobody pretended they hadn't been waiting. What did he want? Cora asked. The man buying the property. Her face changed at once. Oh, he wants an answer. And? Gabriel set the phone on the counter. And he's not getting one tonight. Toby let out a breath. Nell's shoulders eased. June leaned more heavily into Cora, sleepy now, the red coat still clutched in one hand. Cora looked at him carefully, like she was measuring what kind of man he really was under the expensive coat and polished watch. You don't owe us that. He gave a small, humorless smile. I'm starting to think I owe more than I planned. The words slipped out before he could stop them. Cora heard them. So did Nell. The room changed again, quieter this time. Then Gabriel noticed something on the far shelf by the stove. A stack of school papers, pages copied by hand in pencil, each letter traced slowly, carefully. Beside them sat a jar full of sharpened crayons and 3 index cards propped upright like nameplates. He stepped closer. Are you teaching them here? He asked. Cora hesitated, and the answer she gave made him understand that hiding in the house was only one piece of what she had been carrying all alone. Cora took a second before answering, and in that second, Gabriel understood she was deciding how much truth he had earned. Yes, she said at last. I teach them here, or try to. He lifted one of the sheets from the shelf. It was lined notebook paper, cut in half to make it last longer. Across the top, in careful block letters, was Nell's name. Below that were spelling words, copied twice each. Another page held simple sums. Another had short reading questions written in pencil so small and neat they almost looked printed. There were no school logos, no proper workbooks, no bright folders. Just effort. Just stubbornness. You made these by hand, he said. I couldn't enroll them anywhere without making noise, Cora replied. Names on forms, addresses, questions I couldn't safely answer. Nell spoke up from the table, quiet but clear. She does reading after breakfast and math before lunch. Toby hates handwriting. I don't hate it, Toby said. My hand just gets tired. June, who had been tracing the edge of her mug, added in a sleepy murmur, I do colors. That almost made Gabriel smile. He looked at the stack again, then at the jar of crayons sharpened down to nubs. Somebody had been building a whole little school inside this hiding place, while also keeping everyone fed, warm, and calm enough to sleep. Cora had done it with no money, no backup, and no promise that tomorrow would be any easier than today. When do you sleep? He asked. That seemed to catch her off guard. When they do, mostly. Nell answered more honestly. Not much. Cora gave her a look, but the damage was done. Gabriel noticed the shadows under her eyes more clearly now. The roughness of her hands, the way she kept shifting her weight from one foot to the other like someone whose body had forgotten what rest felt like. He set the paper down carefully. Do you have any real books? A few, she said. Shelter donations. An alphabet one, a counting one, and a book with half the pages missing about ocean animals. Toby likes that one because he thinks the missing pages make the sharks more mysterious. Toby straightened. They do. That time Gabriel did smile, brief and unwilling though it was. He moved toward the doorway that led to the back hall. Stay here a minute. Cora frowned. What are you doing? There's a storage room off the mudroom. If no one's cleaned it out, there may be boxes from when my mother lived here. He found the door swollen from years of damp, shouldered it open, and coughed at the burst of dust that came out. The beam from his phone lit shelves, old jars, a cracked sled, 2 folded card tables, and at the back, a cedar trunk with brass corners gone green. He dragged it forward, the scrape loud against the floorboards. By the time he hauled it into the kitchen, all 3 children were standing. What's in it? Toby asked. I don't know. The trunk smelled of cedar and old paper when Gabriel lifted the lid. On top were quilts, neatly folded though long unused. Under those, stacks of books tied with faded ribbon, a checkerboard, decks of cards, a box of colored chalk, and a cloth rabbit with one ear bent flat. June reached for the rabbit, then stopped and looked at him for permission. He nodded. Cora picked up one of the books and ran her fingers over the cover as if she could hardly believe it was real. Nell was already reading the title on another under her breath. Toby had found a bird field guide and opened it wide. Then a thin white envelope slid from between 2 books and fell onto the table. Gabriel saw the handwriting before anyone else did. And this time, his mother had written his name on the front. Nobody touched the envelope at first. Even Toby, who had already opened the bird guide and was halfway in love with it, went quiet. The lamp hummed softly. Somewhere in the wall, old pipes clicked as the heat shifted. Gabriel stared at his own name written in his mother's slanted hand and felt that odd, unsteady pull again, as if the house kept reaching across time to catch him off guard. Cora was the first to step back. You should read it. He nodded, but for a second he only turned the envelope over in his fingers. The paper was thin and dry at the edges. It had never been sealed. When he slid the folded note out, a small key dropped onto the table with a bright metal tap. June jumped. Toby leaned closer at once. Nell, who had already chosen a book and was holding it against her chest, watched Gabriel's face instead. He unfolded the letter. Gabriel, if you're reading this, then you finally came back long enough to look properly. That was his mother. Gentle, direct, and impossible to ignore. I left some things in this trunk because I know how you are. You think in straight lines. You tidy pain into useful boxes. If life has softened you by now, I'm glad. If it hasn't, then maybe this house still can. He let out a breath through his nose. Cora lowered her eyes, giving him privacy without leaving. The children were close enough to hear the paper move when he turned it. The note went on. It mentioned the key. It opened the narrow attic cupboard over the back stairs, the one he had forgotten existed. His mother wrote that there were records there, old church pantry lists, spare blankets, notebooks, and names of people she'd helped through hard winters. At the bottom, one line stood apart from the rest. A house should never be judged by how long it stood empty, but by whether it still knows how to welcome the tired. Gabriel read that line twice. He folded the paper more slowly than he had opened it. His throat felt tight in a way he did not appreciate. Toby broke the silence first. What's the key for? The attic cupboard, Gabriel said. The little door over the back stairs? Nell asked. I thought it was stuck. It probably was, he murmured. Cora looked at him carefully. Do you want to open it now? Part of him wanted to say no, to put the letter away, to leave before the house and the people in it began changing him faster than he could control. But the other part of him, the part that had already bought coats and books and fixed a pipe at night, was tired of pretending he could stay untouched. "Yes," he said. "Now." The back stairs were narrow and steep, more ladder than staircase. The children followed with the hushed excitement that only old hidden spaces can create. Dust lay thick on the top rail. The little door above the landing was exactly where he remembered, painted over so many times it had nearly vanished into the wall. He had to force the key once, then twice. On the third turn, the lock gave with a dry click. When he pulled the door open, cold, stale air drifted out, carrying cedar, paper, and something faintly floral from decades ago. Inside were shelves. Blankets, yes. Boxes, too. Stacked notebooks. Jars of buttons. A tin full of pencils. And on the middle shelf, tied with blue string, several file folders labeled in his mother's hand. Cora stepped up beside him, close enough that he could feel the warmth of her sleeve near his arm. One folder had pantry names, another had receipts, a third had no names at all on the outside. Gabriel slid that one free, opened it, and saw photographs clipped to forms. Children, dates, notes, signatures. Then Cora made a sound so small he almost missed it, because one of the names in that folder was Darren Pike. Cora took the folder from him with fingers that had gone suddenly cold. The little attic cupboard was too cramped for all of them, so Gabriel guided the children back down to the kitchen first. Toby protested because he wanted to keep looking at the bird guide. Nell wanted to know whether the folder mattered, and June only wanted the cloth rabbit and Cora's hand. Once they were settled at the table under the lamp, Gabriel and Cora stood by the back stairs and opened the papers together. Inside were dated notes in his mother's handwriting, careful observations, names of families who had come for pantry boxes, notes about who needed blankets, who had a sick child, who had lost work. And there, over and over again across 2 winters, one name appeared with a line underneath it. Darren Pike. Gabriel skimmed, then slowed. His mother had written that Darren collected food for his sister's children, and often returned alone asking for extra goods. Another note said she delivered a parcel once and found the children underdressed while Darren complained about money. A third note, written months later, was sharper. Children appear thinner. Oldest girl avoids eye contact. Youngest coughing badly. Darren refused medicine bags, said they were fine enough. Cora pressed her lips together so hard they blanched. "She saw it," she whispered. "Your mother saw it." "Looks that way." "She wrote it down." Gabriel nodded. The pages smelled faintly of cedar and old ink. He turned another sheet and found a copy of a pharmacy receipt stapled to the corner, along with a note explaining that his mother had paid for cough syrup and children's vitamins when Darren claimed he'd forgotten his wallet. There was a date, a signature, a store name. For the first time since stepping into the house, Gabriel felt something firmer than pity take shape. Evidence. Thin, informal, old, but still evidence. Cora looked up at him. "If he ever comes here, he'll say I stole them. He'll say I manipulated them. He'll say I wanted money, even though I never touched a cent." Her voice shook now from exhaustion. "People believe papers. He always has papers." Gabriel thought of the copied school sheets, the halved cough drops, the headlights outside. Then he thought of his mother, who had apparently seen more than she'd said aloud and left behind a trail because she knew someday someone would need it. "We can make papers too," he said. Cora stared at him. "What?" "We gather everything. These notes, the receipt, anything from the shelter, anything with dates." He spoke more quickly now, the way he did when a problem stopped being emotional and became solvable. "You said June got sick. Was there a clinic visit?" "At the shelter, yes. A volunteer nurse looked at her." "Name?" "Linda Mercer, I think. She worked the overnight rotation." "Good, that's a start." From the kitchen, Toby called, "Are we in trouble?" Gabriel stepped back into the warm room and forced his face to soften. "No, you're not in trouble." Nell studied him with that sharp, guarded intelligence of hers. "Then why are you talking like that? Like what? Like grown-ups do when they're making a plan. He almost smiled. Maybe because I am. Cora came in behind him, carrying the folder against her chest. The lamp lit her face from the side, and he could see fear there still, but mixed with something new. Trust was too expensive for her to hand over quickly, but hope had entered the room, and that was dangerous in its own way. Then Gabriel pulled out his phone. "It's late," Cora said. "Who are you calling?" He looked at the folder one more time before tapping the contact. The only lawyer I trust to tell me the truth. When the line began to ring, a pickup engine sounded outside again, closer than before. The engine outside idled low, rough and steady, like somebody in no hurry at all. Every person in the house heard it. June pressed herself into Cora's side so quickly she nearly spilled the rabbit. Toby went stiff and alert, no longer a boy with a new book, but a child who recognized danger by sound. Nell turned her face toward the front of the house and stopped breathing through her mouth. Gabriel held his phone in one hand and the folder in the other, listening as the tires crunched once on gravel and then stopped. "Take them into the pantry," Cora whispered. He looked at her. "Why the pantry? No windows." That answered everything. Gabriel nodded toward the children. "Go with Cora, quietly." Toby did not move. "Who is it?" "I don't know yet." "You do know," Nell said softly. Gabriel didn't lie to her. "I know who it might be." Cora hurried the three of them through the kitchen. The pantry door opened with a dry scrape, then closed again. Gabriel heard June coughing once, muffled behind Cora's hand. The whole house seemed to contract around that sound. At the same moment, Mara Ellison finally answered in his ear. Sleep roughened her voice. "Gabriel, do you know what time it is?" "I'm sorry, I need quick advice." That woke her up. "How quick?" "There are 3 children in my mother's house. A woman brought them there because their uncle's been taking their benefits and neglecting them. I found notes, receipts, dates, and I think the uncle may be outside right now." Silence. Then, very clearly, "Start from the part where there are children in the house you were supposed to sell." He gave her the shortest version he could manage while crossing to the front window. He kept back from the glass and lifted one corner of the curtain with 2 fingers. Through the dark yard and the thin stand of trees, he saw a pickup truck angled near the road. Headlights off now, engine still on. A shape behind the wheel, broad-shouldered, hat brim low. Mara listened without interrupting. When he finished, she said, "Do not go looking for a fight, do you hear me?" "I hear you." "If you have anything with names, dates, receipts, preserve it. Photograph every page. Tomorrow, I want copies sent to me. Tonight, if he approaches the house or threatens anyone, call the sheriff's office and make a report. Even if they do nothing immediate, a report matters." Gabriel kept watching the truck. "And the children?" "Without custody paperwork, the woman is vulnerable. But if what you're saying is true, so is the uncle. If there's fraud or neglect, this can turn fast." She paused. "Do the children want to go with him?" He almost laughed at the question, though there was no humor in it. "No." "Then keep them inside. Keep them calm. And Gabriel." "Yes?" "If you're about to tell me your emotions are not involved, save it. They already are." The line went dead a second later. Gabriel lowered the phone and took 3 quick photographs of the folder pages, right there by the stairs. Then he moved to the porch door and checked the lock. Old, but holding. He glanced toward the pantry. No sound now. Cora was doing exactly what she'd promised herself she would do for those children. Keep them steady, even while she shook inside. The truck engine cut off. The silence after it was worse. Then a car door opened outside, slow and deliberate, followed by the crunch of boots on gravel. A man's voice called from the darkness, loud enough for everyone in the house to hear. "Cora, I know you're in there." The voice from outside was thick with confidence, the kind that comes from years of getting away with things. "Cora!" it called again, closer now. You can stop hiding. Bring the kids out and let's do this the easy way. Gabriel crossed to the porch door but did not open it. Through the thin glass pane, he could make out a broad shape at the bottom of the steps, hat brim low, hands in the pockets of a heavy jacket. Darren Pike stood like a man on his own property, like a man who believed the law would eventually choose him simply because it always had. From the pantry came the faint scrape of a shoe. Cora had heard him too. Gabriel raised his voice just enough. "They stay inside." There was a short pause, then a snort. "And who exactly are you?" "Owner of the house." That changed the air outside for one beat. Gabriel could almost feel the man recalculating. "Well then," Darren said, smoothing his tone into something uglier because it tried to sound polite. "This is a family matter. That girl's unstable. She took my brother's kids without permission." Gabriel didn't answer at once. He wanted the silence. Wanted the other man to keep talking. Mara's advice was still ringing in his ear, and some old business instinct had kicked in hard. Let a greedy man explain himself long enough, and he usually revealed where the rot was. "What do you want?" Gabriel asked. "My children back." "They're not your children." A pause, then sharper. "You know what I mean." "I know exactly what you mean." The porch light was too weak to show details, but Gabriel saw Darren shift his weight, frustrated. "Listen," he said, "those kids belong with family. The checks come to me because I'm responsible for them." The woman inside took off because she's got ideas in her head. There it was. Not grief, not concern. The checks. Gabriel felt anger settle in him, heavy and clean. "You might want to choose your words better." Darren laughed once. "Or what? You going to play hero because you found a sob story in your empty lake house?" Behind Gabriel, the pantry door opened a crack. Cora had heard enough. Her voice came low and shaking from the dark gap. "Don't make them hear him." He turned just enough to see her face, pale, eyes bright with fear and fury both. June clung to one side of her sweater. Nell stood behind her with her chin lifted, Toby near the floor with both hands over his ears like he could block memory itself. "Back in the pantry," Gabriel said softly. Cora didn't move. "He'll keep coming." "Maybe," Gabriel said, "but not tonight." Then, louder to the man outside, "Leave now. If you step onto this porch, I call the sheriff and report trespass and intimidation." Darren's tone changed again, all rough edges now. "You think your money scares me?" "No," Gabriel said. "I think paperwork might." That landed. He heard it in the silence that followed. Inside, his phone vibrated with a text from Mara. "Report everything. Get played if you can. Keep him talking only if safe." Gabriel shifted a curtain edge with one finger, trying to angle for the truck through the dark. Darren took one step closer instead, boots thudding against the bottom stair. "You don't understand what you stepped into," he said. Gabriel's hand tightened around the phone. Then Darren added almost casually, "And if you've been digging around that house, you may have already found things that don't belong to you." Which meant he knew more about this place. And Gabriel suddenly understood their safety might have been watched longer than any of them realized. The single sentence changed the shape of the night. If Darren knew there were papers in the house, then he hadn't just tracked Cora. He knew something about Gabriel's mother, about the people she had helped, maybe even about the cupboard over the stairs. Gabriel felt a cold, steady line run down his back. Outside, the man shifted on the steps, wood creaking under his weight. "You got quiet," Darren called. "That means I guessed right." Gabriel kept his voice level. "You're trespassing. And you're interfering." From behind him came the soft sound of the pantry door opening again. Cora had not listened. She was there, pale and furious, one hand braced on the frame. Gabriel gave her a sharp look meant to send her back. She ignored it. "What papers?" she asked, her voice low. He answered without turning. "Later." Darren laughed, hearing her now. There you are. You always did think you were smarter than everybody else. His tone grew uglier, warmer somehow, with the pleasure of finally having her cornered. Come out and stop making this dramatic. Those kids belong with their family. Cora took one step forward before Gabriel blocked her with an arm. Don't, he said quietly. She needs to hear me, Darren snapped. No, Gabriel said. She doesn't. Inside, the kitchen lamp threw long shadows across the walls. The bird guide lay open on the table where Toby had left it. June's red coat hung over the back of a chair. Little signs of safety, and outside the door stood the man who had taught those children not to trust it. Gabriel pulled out his phone and angled it low, screen dimmed, camera recording now. Say it again, he said. Darren frowned through the glass. What? Say what you came for. The man scoffed. I came for the children. Because you love them? Gabriel asked. The pause was tiny, real but tiny. Because they're mine to care for. Gabriel let that sit, then pressed 1 inch deeper. And the checks? Darren's jaw shifted. That's none of your business. There it is, Gabriel said softly. Cora's breath caught behind him. She understood what he was doing. So did Darren, a second later, and anger flared across his face. You rich people think you can just take over, he snapped. You flash a watch, wave a lawyer around, and suddenly you own other people's lives. Gabriel almost opened the door then, not to fight, just to make the man feel how badly he had chosen this porch. But Mara's warning held him in place. Instead, he said, You should leave before I send this recording to the sheriff. Darren took another step up. You won't do a thing, because if law gets involved, the woman inside goes down too. Kidnapping, harboring minors, you think they'll thank her for that? The words hit their target. Cora swayed as if struck. Gabriel felt it beside him without looking. That was the cruelty of men like Darren. They didn't need fists when fear worked faster. Then, from somewhere deeper in the house, Toby shouted, voice breaking with panic, Don't let him take us! Everything froze. Darren heard it. His whole face changed, and Gabriel knew, in that instant, that the man outside would not leave tonight thinking this was over. The change in Darren was instant. His head lifted sharply toward the sound inside, and for the first time, the mask slipped all the way. Gabriel saw hunger in it. Not concern, not outrage. Possession. The kind of ugly certainty that says, there they are, and I can still reach them. See, Darren said, voice hardening with victory. They know me. Gabriel didn't answer. He stepped fully in front of the door and raised the phone a little higher so the other man could see it now. You've said enough, he replied. Darren's eyes flicked to the screen. You think recording me changes anything? It changes more than you'd like. The man held his stare for a long second. Then he backed down one stair because he was calculating again. That made Gabriel even more careful. Men like Darren were dangerous when cornered, but sometimes more dangerous when they smiled. All right, Darren said, letting some of the softness back into his voice. Maybe I came in hot. It's late. The kids are confused. I get that. He spread his hands a little. Why don't I come back tomorrow when everybody's calmer? No, Gabriel said. No? You don't come back tomorrow. You don't come back at all unless it's through a lawyer. That hit him. The flicker across Darren's face was small, but Gabriel caught it. Good. Let him understand this had moved out of the dark, out of the level where threats and gossip did the work. Inside the house, Toby had gone quiet again. Too quiet. Gabriel could picture him behind the pantry door, jaw clenched, trying to be brave for June. Cora would be crouched near both of them, keeping her own fear packed down where they couldn't see it. Nell would be listening to every word, remembering all of it. This wasn't just one bad visit. It was becoming a record. Darren spat into the gravel. You wealthy people always think there's some neat solution. A lawyer, a filing, a phone call. Life doesn't work that way for everybody. Gabriel felt his temper pull tight. You had money meant for those children. Don't lecture me about hard life. That landed clean. Darren's mouth twisted. Careful, he muttered. You don't know what you're accusing me of. I know enough. They stood in the cold porch light, the air smelling of wet leaves and lake water. Somewhere deeper in the trees, an owl called once and went silent. Gabriel had negotiated deals worth more than this whole property was ever appraised for, but none of those moments had felt like this. This mattered in a different register. Here, every word touched living people, small people, frightened people. His phone buzzed again, a text from Mara. Call local sheriff now. Make report while he's there. Do not wait until morning. Gabriel glanced at it, then looked back up. I'm calling this in. Darren laughed, but the sound was thinner now. Go ahead. By the time anybody shows up, I'll be halfway home. Maybe, Gabriel said, but your name goes on record tonight. That finally stripped away the rest of the false ease. Darren jabbed a finger toward the house. This isn't over. You tell her that. She took what doesn't belong to her. No, Gabriel said, and his own voice surprised him. Calm, cold, final. She took them out of hunger. For 1 second, there was no sound at all. Then Darren stepped back off the porch, turned, and walked toward his truck. But before he opened the door, he looked over his shoulder and said one last thing. You might want to ask your mother what she promised people in that house. Then he drove off, leaving Gabriel with the words hanging in the dark, and the sudden feeling that the past had not finished opening yet. The truck's taillights vanished between the trees, but the house did not relax. Fear lingers after noise leaves. It sits in curtains, in floorboards, in a child's breathing. Gabriel stayed on the porch another minute, listening to the engine fade into the distance, then pulled the sheriff's number from Mara's message and made the report while everything was fresh. He gave Darren's name, described the threat, repeated the talk about the checks, and read off the partial plate number he had caught when the truck turned. The deputy on duty sounded tired, but he logged it. Call back if he returns tonight, the deputy said. He won't be welcomed. That's not what I asked. Gabriel almost smiled despite himself. Understood. When he went back inside, the pantry door was open. Cora had gotten the children out and settled them around the kitchen table again, though settled was generous. Toby sat rigid with the bird guide shut in front of him. June had climbed into Nell's lap, Rabbit crushed under one arm. Cora stood by the stove with both hands flat on the counter, head bowed for a second, as if gathering pieces of herself off the floor. He's gone, Gabriel said. No one answered immediately. Then Nell asked the only question that mattered to a child who had already learned adults often lied. For how long? Gabriel met her eyes. Tonight. That honesty seemed to help more than comfort would have. Cora turned to him. You shouldn't have had to do that. He shouldn't have come here. I mean any of it. Her voice wavered now that the danger had stepped back outside. I brought all of this to your door. Your sale, your house, your life. My life can survive a delay, Gabriel said. She shook her head. You still don't understand. If Darren thinks there are papers here, he won't stop because you warned him. He stops when something stronger than him stops him. That sentence stayed with Gabriel. He looked at the folder, at the old receipts, at the copied names. Then he looked at the children and realized something in himself had moved past temporary kindness. This was no longer about giving a week. A week belonged to inconvenience. This had become protection. All right, he said. Then tomorrow we make sure something stronger is in place. Toby finally looked up. What does that mean? It means we gather proof. Cora gave a tired, disbelieving breath. At midnight? At midnight, we start a list. He pulled a notepad from the grocery bag where it had been buried under toothpaste and tea, set it on the table, and wrote 3 words across the top. Everything we know. Toby leaned in despite himself. Nell shifted June higher on her lap and watched. Cora came closer, drawn by order the way drowning people are drawn by rope. Gabriel wrote names first. Darren Pike, Linda Mercer, shelter, pharmacy, church pantry records. He wrote dates from the receipts, the clinic mention, the benefits, the headlights, the truck, the threat on the porch. Cora added details in a neat hand once she saw he was serious. Nell quietly supplied one date by remembering the week June got sick. Toby remembered the color of the old envelope Darren used to keep paperwork in. Even June murmured that Darren hated when lights were left on. A case was beginning at the same table where soup had been served. When Gabriel's phone buzzed again, he expected Mara, but the message was from Wesley Crane. Need answer by noon. Buyer won't wait. If the house is tied up in trouble, the deal changes. Gabriel stared at the screen while the kitchen held its breath. Because for the first time, saving them and selling the house had become two roads that could not stay side by side. The message stayed on the screen like a demand from another life. Gabriel read it once, then again, while the kitchen around him slowly settled into exhausted silence. Wesley wanted an answer by noon. The buyer would not wait. The deal would change if the property became trouble. In the world Gabriel had built for himself, those were ordinary words. Efficient words, clean words. They belonged to conference tables, contracts, schedules. But here, under the weak kitchen lamp, with June asleep against Nell's shoulder and Toby staring at the notepad full of names, they felt obscene. Cora saw his face before she saw the phone. "What is it?" He turned the screen toward her. She read the message and went very still. "You should go through with the sale," she said quietly. That made Toby look up at once. Nell tightened both arms around June. Gabriel lowered the phone. "That's not your decision. It's your house. It was my house before I found out what was happening in it." Cora shook her head, already retreating into that practical self-denial he was beginning to understand too well. "You gave us time. You brought food. You stood at the door tonight. That's already more than anybody had a right to expect." Her voice was calm, almost gentle, and somehow that made it worse. "Don't wreck your life over us." He let that sit between them for a second. Then he said, "You keep talking as if my life is happening somewhere else." The words surprised both of them. Gabriel looked around the kitchen as he spoke. The soup pot still sat on the stove. The red coat hung on the chair. His mother's note rested near the notepad with "Everything we know" written across the top. The room smelled of broth, pencil shavings, old cedar from the attic cupboard, and the faint, clean scent of soap from the groceries he'd brought. Nothing about it was polished. Nothing about it was easy. And yet, for the first time in years, he felt painfully awake inside a house. Nell broke the silence in her careful way. "If he sells it, do we have to leave tomorrow?" Cora opened her mouth, but Gabriel answered first. "No." Toby frowned, but the message said noon. The message said he wants an answer by noon. That's different? Yes. Toby thought about it seriously, then nodded once, as if filing away a useful distinction about adults in danger. Gabriel pulled out a chair and sat for the first time since Darren had driven off. Fatigue hit him all at once. So did memory. He saw himself at 10 years old in this same kitchen, hearing his mother refuse easy money because it came with the wrong kind of compromise. He had thought she was foolish then. Poor people, he had decided, could not afford principles. But maybe she had known something he had spent half his life forgetting. He looked at Cora. "Tomorrow I meet the problem in front of me, not the one Wesley prefers." She studied him with red-rimmed, tired eyes. "Why?" "Because your fear made me angry. Because those children hide when headlights pass. Because my mother left records. Because this house keeps putting truth in my hands. Because I don't think I can walk away now and still like the man I'd be after." He did not say all that. He just said, "Because somebody should." No one spoke after that. The quiet wasn't empty this time. It was heavy with thought. Then Gabriel picked up the folder again, turning back to the last thing Darren had said. Ask your mother what she promised people in that house. He opened one of the older notebooks from the cupboard, flipping past pantry lists and winter coat sizes, until, tucked between two pages, he found a folded, hand-drawn map of the property with one place circled in red near the old boathouse. And written beside it, in his mother's hand, were 4 words that made his pulse jump. In case they return. The 4 words on the map kept everyone awake. Even June, though half asleep, stirred when the paper changed hands. Gabriel spread the hand-drawn map flat on the kitchen table and weighed the corners with the mug, the note bundle, and the bird guide Toby refused to let out of reach. The red circle sat behind the old boathouse, near the reeds where the shoreline curved inward. His mother had marked a narrow path through the brush that no longer existed, at least not visibly. In case they return, Cora read again, almost to herself. Who is they? Gabriel looked at the older notebook. People she helped, maybe? Or people she expected back in trouble? Nell leaned forward, careful not to wake June. So she hid something there? Maybe. Toby's eyes had gone bright, despite the fear of the night. Like a secret box? Cora gave him a look. Not now. But Gabriel was already thinking the same thing. The clock on the stove read past midnight. Common sense said leave it until morning. The ground would be slick, the trees would be black as ink. Darren had only just gone. But the map was too pointed, too deliberate, and the line from the notebook was scratching at all of them. What if he comes back before morning? Cora asked quietly. If he knows there's something here. Gabriel met her eyes. She was thinking the same thing he was. Whatever his mother had hidden, Darren might not know exactly where it was, but he knew enough to be dangerous. Nell surprised them both. Then you should go now. Cora turned. Nell? She's right, Gabriel said. Cora stared at him as if deciding whether he had lost what little good sense he still had. It's the middle of the night. And if there's proof out there, I want it in the house before sunrise. The argument died on her face because fear had already reached the same conclusion. He found a heavy flashlight in the storage room and an old rain jacket that still hung behind the mudroom door. The fabric smelled faintly of cedar and age. His mother's, maybe. Cora insisted on coming. Gabriel refused. She insisted again, this time with the flat tone of a person who had already spent too much of life being told to wait inside. You don't know the back path, she said. I do. I've been down there for water. That decided it. Nell stayed with Toby and June in the kitchen, every lamp lit now despite the cost to nerves. Gabriel showed Toby how to lock the porch door and said, if you hear voices, you do not open anything. Toby swallowed and nodded like it was the most important job in the world. Outside, the night closed around them at once. The lake gave off a cold, wet smell. Grass soaked their shoes. The flashlight beam cut through cattails, broken fence posts, and low branches silvered with dew. Cora led him behind the boathouse, where the boards leaned and the roof sagged. The circled place on the map was hidden by a stand of wild reeds and one fallen birch limb. There, she whispered. Half buried under mud and leaves was a flat iron ring set into the ground. Gabriel knelt, wrapped his fingers around it, and pulled. At first, nothing happened. Then the earth gave with a sucking sound, and a wooden hatch lifted just enough for a breath of old, sealed air to rise from the dark below. The smell that rose from below was dry wood, old metal, and paper sealed away from weather and time. Gabriel held the hatch with one hand and shone the flashlight down with the other. A narrow ladder disappeared into a cramped storage pit lined with stone and timber, more like an old storm cache dug beside the boathouse years ago and forgotten by anyone who had not built it. The beam found stacked crates, a covered trunk, 2 shelves, and several oilskin-wrapped bundles set up off the damp ground on bricks. My mother hid a whole room, he murmured. Cora knelt beside him, one hand braced in the mud. Do you think Darren knew about this? He knew enough to worry. That was enough reason to keep moving. Gabriel climbed down first. The ladder creaked under his weight, and a puff of dust lifted when his shoes touched the packed dirt floor. The air was cool and still. Overhead, Cora held the hatch wider while the flashlight beam bounced across labels written in the same slanted hand they had already learned to trust. Winter blankets, dry goods, church records, emergency fund, emergency fund. Gabriel reached for that bundle first. The oilskin crackled under his fingers. Inside was a flat metal box, the kind people once kept important papers in. The latch stuck, then gave. He opened it and felt his pulse thud in his throat. There were envelopes of cash, yes, but that wasn't what caught him. Under the money lay copies, benefit statements, signed delivery slips, pharmacy notes, a church outreach ledger with Darren Pike's name repeated beside dates and amounts. And underneath those, 2 affidavits in his mother's careful file order. One from a pantry volunteer, another from a retired nurse who had seen the children underfed and untreated. Neither looked filed with any office. It was as if his mother had been building a case and waiting for the right hands to finish it. Cora climbed down beside him at last, breath quick from more than the ladder. He handed her the top papers. Her flashlight shook as she read. "Oh my God," she whispered. "This is everything he said nobody could prove." Gabriel thought, but enough to fight with. He moved to the second shelf. More bundles, spare clothing in sealed bags, toothbrushes, children's socks sorted by size, a small ledger with names and coded notes. His mother had made a system down here, quiet and practical, the kind of underground mercy people create when formal help fails too often. Suddenly, Darren's last words made sense. He had known she promised refuge, maybe more than refuge. Maybe safe storage, names protected, emergency money kept off desperate kitchen tables where the wrong person could steal it. "Gabriel," Cora said softly. He turned. She was holding a sealed envelope with his name on it again, newer than the attic one, tucked inside the records box. There was writing underneath. "If Darren ever comes back for them, open this first. For them. Not for someone. Not for a family. For them." Gabriel felt the skin between his shoulders tighten. "She knew," he said. Cora looked at him, stunned and pale in the narrow light. "How could she know them before me?" That was the wrong question, and they both knew it a second later. The right question was worse. If his mother had written that line before Cora ever ran with the children, then somewhere, sometime before all this, Darren Pike had already crossed her path in a way neither of them understood yet. They carried the metal box and the sealed envelope back to the house like something alive might be following them. Inside, the kitchen was warmer than the shore, but no less tense. Nell had gotten June onto a pallet of quilts by the stove. Toby was still awake, knees tucked up in the chair, trying to look brave and failing in that honest child way that breaks your heart. Cora shut the door, checked the lock twice, and only then nodded at Gabriel. "Open it." He slit the envelope carefully with a butter knife. Inside was a folded letter, a smaller packet of forms clipped together, and a key card for a law office storage cabinet, faded but still readable. The first line was in his mother's hand. "Gabriel, if this reaches you, then Darren Pike has come sniffing around again, and that means the children are in danger." Cora covered her mouth. Gabriel read on, slower now. His mother wrote that Darren had once brought the 3 children to the church pantry himself when he needed signatures for emergency aid. He had called them temporary burdens, while the oldest girl stood there holding the little one upright. Gabriel's mother wrote that she helped fill out assistance forms only because the children were shivering, but she copied every page before Darren left. She did it because something in his eyes frightened her. The clipped packet shook slightly in Gabriel's hand as he turned it over. There they were, older copies of benefit paperwork with the children's names, a guardian declaration signed by Darren, and one page where his mother had written in the margin, "Signature does not match prior form." "She knew he was lying," Cora whispered. "She knew enough to keep proof." There was more. His mother had left a brief statement, signed and witnessed by the retired nurse from the pantry notes, saying the children showed signs of neglect and that Darren repeatedly refused supplies unless they could be converted into cash or store credit. At the bottom, she had written one instruction: "If I am not here, take this to Mara Ellison. Her father once helped me protect a family when no one else would listen." Gabriel sat down heavily. Across from him, Toby stared at the papers. "Is that us?" Cora hesitated, but Gabriel answered gently, "Yes." Toby looked at Nell, then at the sleeping June. "So she knew us before we came here." Nell's eyes filled, though she blinked it back fast. "She remembered." That word went through the room like a soft bell. By dawn, the table was covered. The old church copies, the attic notes, the pharmacy receipt, Darren's porch recording, Cora's timeline, the names from the shelter, and now his mother's statement. Gabriel made coffee so strong it almost tasted burnt. Cora finally drank half a mug when he set it in front of her without comment. The children ate toast in silence while the sky outside turned pearl gray over the lake. At 7, Gabriel called Mara again. This time he didn't summarize. He read names, dates, signatures. He sent photographs while she stayed on the line. He heard papers rustling at her end, a drawer opening. Then her voice changed from tired to razor sharp. "Gabriel," she said, "don't meet your buyer at noon. Bring every original document to my office now. I can file for emergency protective action this morning, but if Darren realizes we're moving first, he may try one last thing before the court opens." As if the warning had summoned it, tires crunched outside. 2. The sound of 2 vehicles on the drive snapped every tired nerve awake again. Toby was on his feet before Gabriel could speak. Nell grabbed June's hand and pulled her close. Cora set her coffee down so fast it sloshed across the table and into the papers. Gabriel moved first, sweeping the most important documents into the metal box and shutting the lid with a hard click. "Pantry," he said. This time they didn't argue. Cora got the children moving while Gabriel crossed to the front window and eased the curtain aside. Morning had come up pale and flat over the lake, enough light now to see shapes clearly. The first vehicle was a sheriff's cruiser. Relief hit him so suddenly it almost made his knees weak. The second was Darren's truck. "Damn it," Gabriel muttered. Mara was still on speaker from the kitchen table. "What do you see?" "Deputy and Darren." "Good," she said at once. He blinked. "Good? If law is present, he has fewer ways to perform innocence. Put me on speaker, now." Gabriel did it. Outside, the deputy got out first, one hand resting near his belt, face unreadable at this distance. Darren stepped from his truck slower, hat on, jacket zipped, already wearing the posture of an offended relative. Gabriel knew that type, men who rehearsed victimhood in the mirror. The knock on the door came firm but not hostile. Gabriel opened it only after checking that Cora and the children were out of sight. The deputy introduced himself as Deputy Sloan. Mid-50s, weathered face, eyes that had seen too much to be impressed by loud men. "You called last night," Sloan said. "I did." Darren stepped in immediately. "And I came because that woman abducted my brother's kids." Mara's voice came through the speaker from the table. "Deputy Sloan, my name is Mara Ellison, attorney for Gabriel Thorne. This call is live, and we are preparing an emergency filing supported by documentary evidence of neglect, benefit misuse, and witness statements." That stopped everyone for half a beat. Darren recovered first. "See? This is what rich people do. They lawyer up and call it truth." Sloan held up a hand without looking at him. "One at a time." Gabriel respected him for that instantly. He led the deputy inside, away from the porch. Darren tried to follow, but Sloan blocked him with one shoulder. "You wait." Inside, the kitchen still smelled of burnt coffee and damp paper. Gabriel set the metal box on the table and opened it. He showed Sloan the copied forms, the pantry notes, the pharmacy receipt, the recorded threats from the night before, the older statement from the retired nurse, and finally, the papers from the hidden cache. Sloane went through them more carefully than Gabriel expected. Then he reached the page with the copied guardian declaration and the note in the margin about the mismatched signature. Sloane frowned. Who wrote this? My mother, Gabriel said. She ran church aid out of this house for years. Your mother still living? Gabriel's throat tightened. No. Sloane nodded once, almost respectfully, and kept reading. When he reached the porch recording transcript Gabriel had typed out in the early dawn, he looked up. Do the children want to see him? From the pantry came a small voice before anyone could stop it. No. June. Silence filled the whole kitchen. Deputy Sloane turned toward the closed pantry door. Darren, still outside, must have heard the muffled sound too, because he began pounding on the porch rail and shouting that Gabriel was coaching them, poisoning them, turning family against blood. Sloane's expression changed. And when he stepped back toward the door, his voice was no longer neutral at all. Mr. Pike, he called, you need to lower your voice and keep your hands where I can see them. But Darren had already made the mistake that men like him always make when control slips. He shoved the porch door wider and shouted, "Those checks are mine until court says otherwise." The words hung in the kitchen like smoke. Deputy Sloane turned his head very slowly toward Darren. For one bare second, even the man on the porch seemed to understand what he had just done. Gabriel saw it in the way Darren's mouth tightened, in the quick shift of his shoulders, in the sudden attempt to step back into a softer version of himself. "That's not what I meant," Darren said. Sloane's voice went flat. "Sounded clear enough to me." From the pantry doorway came a tiny, strangled sound. June had heard it. So had Toby. Gabriel moved at once, standing between them and the open porch. Cora put both arms around the children, but her eyes never left Darren's face. Something in her had gone very still. Recognition. Mara's voice came through the phone, sharp as glass. "Deputy, please note that statement as evidence of financial motive. Mr. Thorne, do not let him near the minors." "You hear that?" Sloane said to Darren. "Step off the porch, now." Darren did, but badly. He kept talking because men like him trust their own noise more than silence. "You people are twisting things. I've fed them, clothed them, put a roof over their heads." Nell cut across him before any adult could stop her. "You locked June in the laundry room when she coughed." The whole house froze. Nell stood there small and pale, one hand still gripping June's shoulder, but her voice did not shake. Toby stared at her in shock. Cora whispered her name, but Nell kept looking straight at Darren through the doorway. "You said medicine cost too much," she went on. "You said if we wanted more food, we should stop growing." Gabriel felt the air leave his lungs. Some truths land heavier coming from a child because they carry no polish, no strategy, no performance, just memory. Sloane took one slow breath. "Mr. Pike, turn around and place your hands on your truck." Darren barked a laugh. "On what charge?" "Intimidation, possible benefit fraud inquiry, and until I know more, keeping you away from those kids." Darren's face went dark. "You can't do that on her word and some old papers." "No," Sloane said. "I can do it on your behavior this morning." He moved then, quick and practiced. Not dramatic, not violent, just decisive. Darren cursed, twisted once, then stopped the moment he realized it would only worsen things. The metal click of cuffs sounded louder than it should have in the morning quiet. Inside, June began to cry in earnest for the first time since Gabriel had met her. Cora dropped to her knees and gathered both younger children into her. Nell stood rigid for 2 more seconds, then folded too, trembling now that the words were out. Gabriel stepped back from the door and shut it against the sight of Darren by the truck. The kitchen smelled like coffee gone bitter and wet wool and fear breaking apart. Sloane returned to the threshold a minute later, not entering until Gabriel nodded. "He won't be near the house this morning," the deputy said. "I can't promise where this goes by itself, but your attorney needs to file fast. She's already moving, Gabriel replied. Sloane gave one look around the room, at the papers, the children, the woman holding them together by sheer force of will, and his expression softened by a fraction. Then move faster. Mara came back through the phone immediately. Bring everyone. Originals only. We file in person. Gabriel looked at Cora. She looked up at him with tear-streaked cheeks, June clinging to her neck, Toby pressed to one side, Nell still shaking from what courage had cost her. And then, quietly, as if the question terrified her more than Darren ever had, Cora asked, "If we leave this house with you, are we coming back?" Gabriel looked at Cora, at the children holding on to her, at the open metal box on the table, and answered the question before fear could. "Yes," he said. "You're coming back." The words changed the room. With release, Cora closed her eyes and drew one long, shaking breath, as if her body had been braced for days and could finally unclench. Toby sat down so suddenly the chair scraped the floor. Nell stared at Gabriel with that fierce, watchful face of hers, and when she understood he meant it, her mouth trembled. June only buried herself deeper into Cora's shoulder and whispered, "Good." After that, the morning moved fast. Gabriel drove them all to Mara's office in 2 cars, the metal box buckled into the front seat like a passenger. Deputy Sloane went ahead with his report. By noon, Wesley Crane had left 3 voicemails and 1 angry message about missed opportunities. Gabriel never answered. He sat in a narrow office with bad coffee and humming lights while Mara filed the emergency action, laid out the copied forms, the receipts, the church records, the hidden cash papers, and the porch recording, piece by piece, until the whole ugly shape of Darren Pike stood where everyone could see it. By afternoon, the judge signed a temporary protective order, froze the remaining benefit access, and appointed an emergency child advocate. It wasn't the end of everything. Cases like that never end in one clean stroke, but it was enough. Enough to keep Darren away. Enough to put the children under immediate protection. Enough to make the next door he tried stay closed. On the drive back to the lake, nobody talked much. June fell asleep with the cloth rabbit under her chin. Toby kept one hand on the bird guide the whole way home. Nell watched the water appear through the trees as if she was checking whether a miracle could still be there when you returned to it. When the house came into view, Cora's eyes filled all over again. Gabriel parked, cut the engine, and sat with his hands on the wheel for 1 second before saying the thing that had already become true in his heart. "I'm not selling it." Cora turned to him sharply. "Gabriel, I know what I'm saying." He got out, came around the car, and opened the back door for June. "The deal is done. Just not the one Wesley wanted." Inside, the place looked smaller in daylight, and somehow more alive. Papers still covered the table. The red coat still hung by the chair. A loaf of bread sat under a dish towel. Evidence of fear. Evidence of breakfast. Evidence of people. Gabriel stood in the middle of his mother's kitchen and understood, finally, that she had never been poor in the way he feared becoming. She had known where to put what mattered. Over the next months, the lake house changed without becoming unrecognizable. Locks were replaced, the roof was repaired, the boathouse cache was emptied and documented. Cora helped choose paint colors with the caution of someone learning she was allowed to want things. Nell got a real desk by the window. Toby built bird feeders with Gabriel out by the reeds. June slept through the night with the rabbit tucked under her arm. The legal case widened, and Darren's lies kept breaking against the papers he thought nobody had saved. Years later, strangers still arrived sometimes with the same look Cora once wore at the top of the stairs. That exhausted look of people hoping not to be turned away. The porch light stayed in working order after that. So did the kettle. By the first cold evening of the next season, smoke was rising straight and steady from the chimney, and 5 fresh handprints in flour had been pressed onto a pie crust in the kitchen. It was messy and crooked and perfect enough. If this story stayed with you, leave a word for it in the comments. And if you want another one tomorrow night, you know where to find the button.